We are often captivated by heroic Hollywood films where soldiers charge forward for ideals and freedom. Yet the reality behind the smoke of gunfire carries a much more pragmatic scent, the smell of money. For the modern financial machine, war has long escaped the label of a struggle for survival to become a business project, with profit margins so massive that no civilian industry can compete. While millions of ordinary families must endure the heartbreak of sending their children to the battlefield to face grim life-and-death stakes, in a parallel universe, the gentlemen in air-conditioned Wall Street offices are busy with spreadsheets and dividend charts. To them, every booming explosion in a distant land isn't a sign of destruction. It sounds as sweet as a notification bell announcing that their account balance is growing exponentially. Through a financial lens, war is a high-octane economic stimulus where firepower is converted directly into stock value. The irony is that while citizens must tighten their belts to support the front lines, the financial apparatus has quietly transformed blood and sacrifice into shiny profit figures. It is no longer about winning or losing on the battlefield, but about who collects how much when the dust settles. This very mindset of turning tragedy into a business model laid the first bricks for the global financial system we inhabit today, a world where the elite's pockets are guaranteed by global volatility. This journey will lead us deeper into how America transformed itself into the greatest general contractor in history, starting with the calculated bailout packages in the next chapter. Imagine Europe in 1914 as an elite neighborhood where the big shots suddenly decided to engage in a collective street brawl. Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, they were all busy pummeling each other until their clothes were torn, their treasuries were empty, and not a single bullet remained. While the whole neighborhood was gasping for air from exhaustion, they looked across the ocean and saw America. Uncle Sam, sitting in an armchair, sipping coffee with a smile full of empathy, though, in reality, he was frantically tapping away on a pocket calculator. At this moment, the U.S. displayed a level of wit that bordered on genius. Instead of rushing into that chaotic mess with a gun immediately, Uncle Sam chose to play the friendly neighbor with bottomless pockets and a heart always open to lending debt. This was the birth of the transnational bailout concept. But don't mistake it for a charity. In reality, it was a turnkey project managed from A to Z by the brilliant minds on Wall Street. Under the leadership of J.P. Morgan and formidable financial tycoons, America transformed itself into a national-scale, multi-purpose supermarket. Need ammo to stay in the game? We have the factories. Need wheat to feed the troops? We have vast fields. No cash? Don't worry. We have loans with extremely friendly interest rates. Thus, a dreamlike monetary cycle appeared. America lent money to Europe, which then used that very money to buy goods, steel, coal, and weapons from American companies. The money traveled around the world only to land back in American pockets, but along the way, it gave birth to massive interest rates and skyrocketing service fees. The beauty of being the general contractor is that you always hold the handle. While soldiers on the Western Front were mired in mud, every shell exploding in France or Britain rang like a delightful ka-ching in the accounts of American financiers. One could say that every explosion carried not just TNT, but also a sweet promise of debt repayment with interest. America suddenly became the arsenal of democracy, a giant factory running at full throttle to serve the needs of destruction across the sea. This was the art of the third-party profit at its highest level. Uncle Sam didn't need to break a sweat on the field or take a single scratch from blades or bullets, yet he still walked away with the economic gold medal. American banks turned global chaos into a dazzling financial stage where debts were packaged and sold like luxury goods. As the war reached its most intense phase, the U.S. financial system was so deeply invested that they realized if the side owing them money lost, those IOUs would turn into scrap paper. Thus, the U.S. decision to enter the war in 1917 was not just about justice, it was a fierce, bad debt protection move, a matter of survival for the Wall Street giants. As a result, when the smoke cleared, Europe woke up to find itself buried in debt, while America, once an outsider, had risen to become the world's largest creditor. This formula was so successful that it became the textbook for every conflict thereafter. It proves that in business, you don't always need to be the best fighter. You just need to be the one with the goods and a thick ledger of debt right when everyone needs them most. War, under the direction of Uncle Sam and J.P. Morgan, was officially financialized and became an ironic yet incredibly effective engine for economic growth. When Uncle Sam decided to stop watching the brawl from the bleachers and officially took off his coat to jump into the play in 1917, a daunting puzzle emerged. Where would the money come from? Even if Wall Street banks were filthy rich, they couldn't foot the massive war bill all by themselves. Thus, a marketing script of the highest caliber in human history was born under a very catchy name: Liberty Bonds. This was no longer a dry loan between the government and the public. It was magically transformed into a total mobilization of the heart. Uncle Sam executed a high-stakes psychological strike. If you can't carry a gun to the front, at least carry your wallet to the bank. Legendary posters appeared everywhere, featuring a powerful, pointing Uncle Sam with eyes that seemed to pierce through to the bottom of your pockets, with the message, "I want you to buy bonds." The atmosphere was so electric that even children eagerly smashed their piggy banks, gathering every penny to exchange for thrift stamps. Hollywood stars of the era didn't stay on the sidelines either. They organized massive parades and gave impassioned speeches to convince citizens that every bond bought was a direct slap in the face to the enemy across the lines. The American people, with their fervent patriotism and pure innocence, poured their blood and sweat savings into loans for the government, holding a rock-solid belief that they were directly saving the world. But let's set aside those moving tears for a moment to look at the witty yet heartbreaking reality behind the scenes. While ordinary workers were busily contributing their spare change for a piece of paper promising meager interest decades later, at the top of the financial pyramid, industrialists and arms tycoons were secretly throwing parties. Why? Because the small savings of millions of people were pooled into a massive mountain of cash, allowing the government to sign contracts for guns, warships, and planes at buddy prices. In other words, the people lent money to the government so the government could hand that money over to major corporations, which then raked in staggering profits. It was a superlative financial cycle where sincere patriotism inadvertently became the cheapest source of capital to grease the elite's money-making machine. Uncle Sam was truly an early-stage, multi-level marketing master. He didn't just want you to dedicate your life to the country. He wanted to turn your wallet into a permanent charging station for the war machine. The genius of this ploy was that it turned every citizen into an involuntary shareholder of the war. Once you've sunk your life savings into bonds, you would never dare wish for anything but a total victory. Because if the country lost, those bonds would become nothing more than scrap paper for home decoration. Thus, from a mere observer, you suddenly became the most ardent supporter of every government military spending decision. This cunning strategy laid the foundation for a new truth. To raise capital most effectively, don't use dry figures. Use emotion and a dash of pressure from national duty. And just like that, the pockets of the American people were directly tethered to the weapons production line through an invisible thread called love of country. This was the perfect stepping stone for America to not only win with firepower, but to win absolutely in establishing a colossal national debt system. The very thing that would lead us to the upgrade era of the dollar, where the power of paper money began to overshadow gold in the next chapter. Having gathered enough crowd-funded capital from the people's patriotism, Uncle Sam decided to play an even bigger hand, redefining the concept of currency for all of humanity. Entering the final stages of World War II, America didn't just stop at being the arsenal. It wanted to become the planet's sole ATM. This was when the upgrade formula truly began, as the green slip of paper known as the US dollar made a quantum leap from a mere currency to a new financial religion. Previously, for money to have value, it had to be backed by gold. Meaning, if you took a bill to the bank, they had to give you a corresponding chunk of gold. But America realized that lugging around heavy piles of gold was both exhausting and restrictive to the creativity of the printing press. Thus, at the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference, a new set of rules was established. Every other currency in the world would peg to the US dollar, and only the US dollar would peg to gold. Essentially, America told the world, just use my money. I swear I have the gold in the vault. But this sweet trick was merely a stepping stone. As the costs of war escalated later on, the volume of dollars printed reached a point where the gold in the vaults was no longer enough to cover the charade. In 1971, President Nixon officially declared a breakup with gold. From that moment, the dollar was no longer secured by precious metals, but by a much more tangible power: raw muscle. Your greenback has value not because it can be traded for gold, but because it is insured by a fleet of aircraft carriers, guided missiles, and a global network of military bases. At this point, war was no longer a sporadic event to resolve conflicts. It became the backbone for maintaining faith in the currency. When you are the biggest creditor, and also the guy with the biggest fist, you earn the right to force everyone to use your paper to buy oil, trade goods, and repay debts. The petrodollar system was born precisely to ensure that no matter how much money America printed out of thin air, the world would still need it to keep the energy flowing. The beauty of this loop is, the US uses military might to protect the dollar's status, then uses those very dollars printed from thin air to feed the military. War and money have now merged into one, forming an inseparable entity. This leads us straight to an even more bitter reality in the next chapter, when ballistics become a long-term economic strategy and peace is sometimes viewed as a risk to growth. Once the dollar became the uncrowned king of the financial world, America discovered a shocking secret. To keep this throne from wobbling, they had to keep the wheels of industry spinning. Thus, an economic doctrine with a rather fancy name was born: military Keynesianism. Don't let the academic name confuse you. It's really just a posh way of saying, keep tossing money at guns, and the bread and butter will take care of themselves. Entering the Cold War, and especially the Vietnam War, this theory was pushed to new heights. Instead of waiting for a crisis to provide aid, the US government began treating defense spending as a daily energy drink for the economy. The logic here was truly audacious. The state orders thousands of planes and tanks. Corporations like Boeing or Lockheed Martin hire tens of thousands more workers. Those workers get paid and go shopping, and boom, the economy explodes. In the eyes of policymakers back then, peace was sometimes a risk, because without an enemy to bombard, where would the excuse come from to sign those billion-dollar checks? But the trap lies in the fact that while defense contractors are always the first to cross the finish line on the balance sheet, with net profits skyrocketing regardless of the result on the battlefield, ordinary citizens start receiving bonus gifts that no one asked for. That would be the perfect combination of high taxes, mountain-high national debt, and especially inflation. To afford both guns, weapons, and butter, social welfare, the government chose the simplest solution: print more money and borrow. As cash flooded the system like a deluge while actual goods didn't increase accordingly, the value of the currency began to evaporate. Americans in the 1970s had to learn a bitter lesson. They weren't just fighting with bullets abroad, they were fighting the price of eggs, milk, and gas at the supermarket next door. The financial system had truly become a conflict addict. Once the military-industrial complex caught the scent of profit, stopping was almost impossible, as it would cause a withdrawal shock to an entire economy already too accustomed to the intoxicant of debt. This leads us to the final ironic chapter, where war is no longer just a phase, but has become a quote-unquote new normal, silently picking your pocket every day under the guise of protecting the world. And so, we have reached the final stop of our Follow the Money journey. After decades, from World War-era artillery shells to today's high-tech drones, one thing remains unchanged. This machine never gets tired. Whether the conflict is named Iraq, Afghanistan, or any new, quote, hotspot on the map, the closing script is always a dull, carbon copy of the past. Have you ever wondered why wars lasting decades and costing trillions of dollars end in chaotic withdrawals, yet defense contractors still report record profits? It's because in this game, winning or losing on the battlefield is merely secondary. Disbursement and payment are the main events. When a war breaks out, the government reverts to the old playbook: borrow heavily. Giants like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon rake in lucrative contracts, shareholders cheer over dividends, and then, who stands up to pay the final bill? My condolences, it's you. The quote, bitter truth is that this financial machine doesn't just run on gunpowder, it runs on the very purchasing power in your pocket. Every time the central bank prints more money to fund a defense deficit, the value of every dollar in your hand withers a little. This is the, quote, hidden tax called inflation. You feel the price of a bowl of pho rising or gas becoming more expensive? That is your indirect contribution to the aircraft carriers currently roaming the oceans. The most hard-earned financial lesson here isn't about learning how to trade stocks or save pennies. It lies in being sharp enough to look through the heroic slogans of freedom or justice. Before nodding in support of a policy or an intervention, pause for a second and look at your own account balance. Ask yourself, at this grand banquet, am I the guest of honor or am I the main course on the table? Ending this journey, I hope you have gained a more multidimensional view of the modern financial world. This system is designed to turn volatility into profit and citizen dependency into elite power. If you don't understand how it operates, you will forever be the one paying the bill for parties where you didn't even get to taste an appetizer. Keep a cool head, a warm heart, and above all, a very tight grip on your wallet. In this world, financial literacy is the best body armor to protect you against the muzzles of inflation and debt.